So when I stood up to my school board, I laid all this paperwork on their table. I said, if you don't, and this is basically a letter of intent, if you don't back down on these mask policies right now, I'm going to file a claim against your surety bond. And sure enough, 7 days later, they did it in the fine print. They removed the mask mandate. And they said to everyone, now masks are voluntary. And once we knew this system worked, we went ahead and took it national. We taught the people how to FOIA request on behalf of their children at the school districts. So many times the parents were standing up to the school board, and the school board would shut off the lights. They would run out of the room like cockroaches. They would seek counsel to their lawyers, and they would come back 7 days later and vote 7-0, no masks and no more pornography in the library. Because again, the pornography also in the library is sexual harassment. This whole LGBTQ plus movement is sexual harassment, and it wouldn't be allowed in any workforce, and it should never be allowed in our schools. Okay, so I'm going to try to sum this all up in 15, 20 minutes. But my goal right now is to teach you how we never had a vote because our republic was stolen from us in 1871. And it all goes back to that. Okay, so we've actually been participating in an illusion of freedom, an illusion of a vote, an illusion of a legal system, law and order, an illusion of courts, and an illusion of authority. All right, guys, here we go. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about me. In 2022, we started a project called Bonds for the Win. And at the time, we were really upset that our children were masked at the public schools. And so I called up my girlfriend, Ann LaFleur, who's amazing. And she pretty much came back to me and she said, these people are licensed, bonded, and insured, which means they have an oath of office. They have a bond, which is surety to we the people, that they're going to perform their duties and responsibilities. And they're also insured, meaning they have a liability policy. And these people are practicing medicine without a license. So what we did was we put it to the test. We went and we got 3 wins. We pulled the bonds and the liability policies by sending in a FOIA request. FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act request. So you send us a simple letter. It's a 1-page letter to any elected or appointed official in any government or public school setting. And you basically just ask them for this information and they have to send it to you. So when we started receiving this, what we did was we took that information and we stood up to the school boards. We said, if you do not drop this mask mandate on our children, we will file a claim against either your liability policy or your bond. And here's a list of all the things that we see, all the violations that we see, all the laws you're breaking, the state, national, and international laws that you're breaking. And there were 27 laws. And the way that these bonds were set up is, depending on the type of policy they have surety to us, meaning they are personally liable for any individual claim. So if you have 10 parents standing up with you and they are personally liable for up to $100,000 per claim, and some of these cases they were liable for up to $4 million per claim. If they are liable for $100,000 per claim and you drop 10 claims on them, that's $1 million. So when I stood up to my school board, I laid all this paperwork on their table. I said, if you don't, and this is basically a letter of intent, if you don't back down on these mask policies right now, I'm going to file a claim against your surety bond. And sure enough, 7 days later, they did it in the fine print. They removed the mask mandate. And they said to everyone, now masks are voluntary. Well, once we had 3 wins throughout the country, we had a win in Illinois through a woman named Violet, another win in North Carolina through a woman named Katie, and myself. And once we knew this system worked, we went ahead and took it national. We taught the people how to FOIA request on behalf of their children at the school districts. And it was like a rush, like God was just moving all of his pieces. All the mama bears and the papa bears just jumped on this opportunity because we were really tired of seeing our children being treated like this at the public schools. Okay, so many times the parents were standing up to the school board and the school board would shut off the lights. They would run out of the room like cockroaches. They would seek counsel to their lawyers and they would come back 7 days later and vote 7-0, no masks and no more pornography in the library. Because again, the pornography also in the library is sexual harassment. This whole LGBTQ plus movement is sexual harassment, and it wouldn't be allowed in any workforce, and it should never be allowed in our schools. So what happened was state by state, one after another, started to release the mask mandates. And by the way, at this time in in Washington and in Oregon, they were starting to threaten force inoculations. So we were absolutely motivated to take action at this point in time. We also started realizing that if we pulled the bonds for, let's say, Governor Ducey, it was a blanket bond. It covered the entire state of Arizona. So once we started getting these bonds, we were posting them online, and we were just like, go get them, guys, go get them. And so we posted Newsom's bond. We posted Ducey and Inslee and Brown. And next thing you know, there were hundreds of school districts being served overnight. And within 3 or 4 months, we saw Biden remove the mask mandates, and 50 million children were liberated in such a short period of time, because we as parents really finally took that offensive stance and said, wait a minute, who are you? And who do you work for? And how do you derive your authority over us and our children? And how is it that you can just break the law and not have any recourse? And that should be a question that everyone asks right now. Why have we been pushed all the way back to the 1 yard line and never, ever see any remedy? Why isn't there a single employer out there that is getting in trouble for forcing any kind of an experimental treatment without any isolated virus? I mean, why is no one in jail for this? Okay. And that's because I'm going to tell you today why that is. It's because we don't actually have law and order in our country. We don't actually have freedom on paper. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to tell you how much we learned from this experiment for Bonds for the Win. Because as soon as we had that win, we had so many people from all over the world, all these light workers and intelligent men and women that came to us, teaching us about law, teaching us about hidden law. And so law stands for land, air, water. So you've got law of the land, which is common law. Okay, that's trial by peers. That's accountability. Guess what? We don't have a single common law court in our country. They've all been moved out because we were invaded in 1871. And I'm going to show you why and how in 1 second. But the second type of law is trust law, air. It's the law of commerce. And in trust law, you're operating in the private. Okay. And all the Rothschilds and all of them know all about operating in the private, except for that's a type of law that had been kept from us. So common law had been kept from us. Trust law had been kept from us. And then thirdly, you have maritime or water. So maritime, admiralty, corporate law, political law, those are all in the same category, and they're all law of corporations. So the thing about corporations is if you create the corporation, you control the bylaws of the corporation. I don't have a vote for Walmart or any other corporation for that matter, and I have a choice of who I want to contract with when it comes to business. So if I want to shop at Walmart, I shop at Walmart. If I want to contract, I contract. Okay. So a corporation can only do business with another corporation when it comes to business and contract law, which means that they had to turn us into corporations in order to contract with us within these courts. Okay, so let's talk 1871. Let's back all the way up, because when I found out this information, I realized, wow, this is the answer. This is the key. So right now I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you how they took over our country in 1871. So to give some basic history here, the United States of America is really one of the only countries that ever had freedom. And we had that in 1776 when we signed the Declaration of Independence. Our forefathers understood this enemy. They understood Great Britain very well. They were at war. And we really only had freedom for maybe around 7 years before we entered into a new contract agreement with Great Britain and France. And we agreed to a debt. And at the time, Great Britain agreed to leave us alone. And there's a lot more to that story I'm not going to get into right now. But let's just put it this way. After 70 years, the debt was due. And when the debt was due, all hell broke loose. What had happened is you basically had a republic at the national level, a union, if you will. And the only reason that the people joined the union, that each of the states joined the union, was to protect against a foreign invasion. Okay. And at the time, the republic, when they first set it up in 1776, it was structured as a trust. Okay. So at the time, the states had formed a union, but they had also formed their own sovereign nations. There were 35 states that had formed their own republics. So think of Texas. Texas wanted to run their republic differently than Maine or Delaware or, Florida. and they had a different set of bylaws. So the way they had originally structured their sovereign nations, and there were 35 established by 1871, there's an executor in every trust, a trustee, and a beneficiary. So there's always three parties in a trust. And at the time, the executor, is basically the person who's carrying out the trust, was set up as the governor, but he's an elected or public servant. And then the servants were the trustees. So the public servants were actually considered servants. They were considered, noble servants to the people, because we, the people, were the beneficiaries of the trust. And the trust cannot fail for lack of a trustee, meaning if any public servant falls out of line for any reason whatsoever, we, the people, created government. Therefore, we, the people, control government. Therefore, we, the people, move people out if they're not operating within the rules and the guidelines of the trust. So the rules and the guidelines of a trust are called a trust indenture. And they called that trust indenture our Constitution. So every state had its own constitution, but there was also a constitution at the national level or the union level. Okay. So remember, the reason they structured it this way was to have autonomy from the union. They wanted to be able to operate autonomously in the event that there was ever a domestic invasion or domestic foreign invasion or government overreach. So this was a very smart system that our original forefathers set up. They had peace officers. They were operating under common law, which is trial by jury. They were operating with a true justice system and a true vote. And in fact, when you had a true vote and you owned land, you were considered an elector. And because you had a vested interest in your land, you got 4 votes to 1 of any of the people passing by or anyone that wanted to vote because they considered themselves residents of the state. So it was a very smart system, and it was working very, very well until 1871. And there were many, many things that led up to this. But just like all wars, they're funded by bankers, and they're funded by, the deep state, which likes to fund both sides of every war. And so what happened was they created a civil war. They fabricated the civil war. They fabricated racism. They fabricated the KKK. And the bankers were essentially starting to try to take over. I won't get into the greenbacks and all that stuff, but what happened was everyone in the Senate, the House and the Senate, and all the positions of the trustees of these trusts, they vacated their offices because they had had enough. They got bullied out of their offices. And when they came back, when these governors supposedly came back, they came back as corporations. And when they came back as a corporation, it was a completely different structure. Now it was a corporation. And then they tied up or locked up their corporation in a trust. So now you had the executor, which is basically the elite controlling the trust. You've got paid actors who are calling themselves governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, treasurer, House, and Senate, but they are not. They are simply corporate officers working for a corporation where they make up their own bylaws. They make up their own rules. So every bill you've ever seen that's ever been passed is a corporate bill. No different than like a rule that they write for Walmart, like, hey, no running in the aisles. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's that ridiculous. They call themselves lawmakers. They act like they care about you. They act like you're free, but you're not free. So like Governor DeSantis up there is a very well pedigreed actor. He is a puppet for the deep state on paper, lawfully, legally. And this is how they usurped our whole country. They did it in a legal way. Now you can think of legal as fiction, lawful as true or de jure, and legal means de facto, means false, means it's made up. It means you choose to contract with them or not. And they actually don't have any jurisdiction over you, and you don't have any jurisdiction over them. It goes both ways, right? It's all about, will you agree to contract with us? And then the mafia are essentially the beneficiaries of all things in this trust. And in 1871, what they did is they told all the people, they said, oh, we need to revise our constitution because, this constitution is no longer good. Well, no, they were writing a new constitution. They called it a constitution, but it wasn't. It was now a constitution or bylaws. Now, when you name a thing the same thing, it's not the same thing. And it's in all caps. So anytime you see any form of agreement, any kind of a court document or any kind of an oath of office, anytime you see all caps, that's representing corporation. It's a syntax or symbolic text, dog Latin. So anytime you look at a court document or anything like that, You can take a black magic marker and block out anything in all caps and then reread that document. And you'll then know which part of it was legal fiction. And when I say legal fiction, I mean, it's a corporation that has set themselves up, but they have no derived authority over you whatsoever. They may act like they're authority figures, but they're not. So then they brought in policy enforcers. They removed all the police precincts and brought in policy enforcers, fake rules, fake courts, because there's over 685 courts in the United States, and they're all corporations. They're all run by corporations. They are not courts. They are not for we the people. We are no longer the beneficiaries of this trust, which means we don't have a vote. It's a contrived vote. We are no longer the beneficiaries of this system. And what's really interesting, what I told you, and this is the key word, what I'm just teaching you right now, is vacated. These offices were vacated, but that doesn't mean we can't reseat them. We can stand up our republics again and have immediate, we become the beneficiaries. So that means we have immediate standing. So we have to now learn the difference between status, standing, and character. When we act belligerent and we come in their courts and we are operating under our legal fiction straw man, all caps name, which is the one that's on your driver's license, and they're contracting with you as a corporation. Okay. And so a lot of people realize that if they declare themselves as a living being, that I'm not willing to contract with you, then you realize how big of bullies they become and how they start to try to enforce things and they start to come after you and collect, because here's the thing, they're all running in lockstep. You've got the government, which is all corporations so the city, the county, the state, they're all corporations. The corporation at the national level, and then you have corporations at the courts. So every court is a corporation, every police precinct, every jail, and they're drawing money out of your SESTA KV. They're operating in commerce behind the scenes every time you interact with them. So I want you to envision for a second that we have been completely invaded. Our country has been completely invaded by foreign corporations. These are all corporations of the British. So the British invaded us again, but lawfully and legally through foreign corporations. And because they were operating under the guise of freedom, the illusion of freedom and the illusion of law and order, they kept us hypnotized, if you will. And then you add in the fake news and you've got a recipe for disaster, because all they have to do is come out with a fake flu. And what you don't realize is because you registered to vote and you registered with a foreign corporation to vote, you gave them access to your SESTA KV or your private estate. And that means that this executor, this governor, whoever it is that claims to be governor at any given time can call, oh, we're at war and I got to draw money to protect the people out of all of your estates. And they can draw out trillions of dollars just to take us to war. Okay. So that's pretty crazy. It's big news, because the good news and the silver lining of what I'm trying to teach you right now is the fact that we can restore our republics and we can stop participating in fakery, in the illusion, and we can start participating in trust law, where we, the people, are the beneficiaries. Because today, we don't have a constitution. We don't have anyone who's going to enforce a constitution. If you were to go and ask for a governor's oath of office, you're going to see that they sign an oath of office as a corporation. Can you have a corporation, an all caps corporation, representing you as we the people? No. Oftentimes they signed the oath of office to the foreign corporation under the foreign corporation's all caps constitution. So when you see constitution in all caps, you're not looking at our constitution. You're looking at theirs, their written bylaws, and they don't have to enforce them if they don't feel like it. They don't have to show up to anything if they don't feel like it. Lawfully, they don't have to show up because they're operating as a corporation. They're not operating as a republic under a trust. We are not the beneficiaries of these corporations. All right. So in 1861, President Lincoln, before he was assassinated, he saw the writing on the wall and he understood trust law and he knew we were in deep, deep trouble. So what he did was he took and created a new trust, a wrapper trust. And he took all 35 states that were sovereign nations at the time, and he wrapped them up as the beneficiaries of a public trust. And he set it up to where the executor is the commander in chief, And the military are the protectors, because if the trustees ever stood out of line or they didn't do what they were supposed to do to protect the trust under the trust indenture, which was the Gettysburg Address in 1863, if they don't perform their duties, the military was to step in to protect these 35 states in the event of a foreign invasion. Well, guess what? We've been invaded ever since 1871. So that's why military was the only way. And that's how Trump was able to lawfully and legally operate on behalf of our U.S. military to take back the world, because our military was the military arm of the cabal. There were 3 arms of the cabal, and the United States military was one of the arms. The financial arm, I believe, was Saudi Arabia, funding all politicians in the U.S. and in Europe. And then you had the Vatican, which was the religious arm of the cabal. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln saved the world. All right, and I'm going to tell you more about that, because in 2016 and 2017 is when Trump got every single country to capitulate. And he basically dropped a lot of evidence on them, and he got them to capitulate to we the people. So I'm here to tell you that Trump has already taken back the republic. He is currently the 19th president of the republic. Okay, Biden is currently the president of the false, phony, and fake corporation at the national level. So what you're watching is a president of a corporation that has absolutely no jurisdiction over you. And quite frankly, we don't have a whole lot of jurisdiction over them because they are a corporation. So what needs to happen now is everyone needs to redirect all their attention and all their resources and all their money and all their time and quit focusing on the voter fraud. And yes, there's a lot of voter fraud. I'm glad everyone knows about that now. But we now need to focus on the solution, and that is to restore the republics. So forever we were watching CNN thinking we could trust the fake news. Then we moved over to Fox and we realized they were telling a bit more truth. Then a lot of us moved over into the Q and the Q disclosure, because that was bringing us so much information. We were doing a bunch of research. And then a lot of us went on to watch how Trump took back the world, restored the republic, and dissolved the corporation at the national level, which I believed also dissolved all the corporations, the corporations underneath it, which were the states, the counties, and the cities. So when you dissolve the corporation at the top, you dissolve all subsidiaries of. And so he's been dismantling those behind the scenes this whole time. But now it's time to start focusing on restoring the republics. So the good news is that a lot of people figured this out early on, and they started to get to know and understand the original Declaration of Independence and what we were supposed to do in the event that we were fully invaded. We were supposed to abolish the government. Well, it's kind of hard to abolish a corporation, because that corporation was not only operating, to essentially had taken over the whole U.S. And they were all operating in lockstep. So it's kind of hard to abolish corporations. Okay, it's one thing to abolish a government; it's another thing to abolish corporations. But it also said that we can restore our republics. So many very, very brave men who've brought me a lot of this information I'm here to tell you today are operating in the private, behind the scenes, who have actually restored those republics. So how did they do that? Well, they went down to their national archive, the National Archive of the state, and they restored the state seal and the state flag, and they claimed them, and they claimed back those offices. So there are many people sitting in those offices, in this office of governor, for example, of Illinois, or governor of California, that are holding those seats out of necessity to protect we the people and to direct the military on what to do for we the people, until there is such a time that we can rewrite our constitutions for each sovereign nation, each state, and until such a time that we can come together as a nation and agree on a fair and safe election. Okay, so this is really, really good news, you guys. There's a solution. We don't have to watch this shit show anymore. We don't have to participate in fraud anymore. Okay, so in 2020, Trump made a declaration underneath Mount Rushmore on July 4th, 2020. And he said, I'm going to go sign a very special document. Well, it was actually Melania had posted a tweet. It was very subtle. And also Gene Decode had mentioned this. So we started researching it. And my friend Jim Huguenin unearthed this new 2020 Declaration of Independence. And he created a website called WeThePeopleDeclareFreedom.com. And many people have gone to sign the new Declaration of Independence. Now, at this point in time, I'm not exactly sure if it's a proposal or if it's the real deal, the final deal. But I know that that was one of the things that Trump had to set up in order to take back the republic. So he has already told us in certain ways that, hey, we're about to go back to trust law. We're about to go back to the way that the forefathers had originally laid out our country, and we're just simply going to restore it. Now, in the future, we may create all new nations. I don't know. But for right now, we can restore the original republics. So a lot of those guys are looking for people to come and hold position. And a lot of it has happened behind the scenes. So I couldn't give you a directory of all the people that have stepped up out of necessity to protect the nation. However, I can tell you this, Texas has officially restored their republic, and their new president is named Billy Ford, and their new de jure sheriff is named Joshua James. And so there are people out there trying to teach this. They're trying to get this message out. But because the deep state knows that we're trying to restore our republics, they keep trying to infiltrate. So, there's been some egos and a lot of this information has been kept from us. So we don't know the specific, how to set up official grand juries in each state, and how to set up official Article 3 common law courts, and how to set up petit juries in each county. Okay. But that's what we're trying to figure out right now. That's what's going on in the front lines. All right. So I think that covers a lot. Okay. So let's talk about the courts and the lawyers. So unfortunately, every lawyer that has signed an oath to the Bar Association, the British Accreditation Registry, are essentially men in black working for the Crown, working for the British, and they may or may not know it. But because of all the corporate law that they're pushing, they are essentially representing this mafia. Let's just put it like that. The judges are all wearing black. They have never, the entire time, have never had jurisdiction over you. And because of the way that they've been operating in fraud and not through the consent of the individuals that they're contracting with, every single ruling you've ever watched in any court ever since 1871 is null and void. So when you watch some win on the news and you go, woohoo, we won that battle, we won that court case. No, you didn't. Unfortunately, they're all run by foreign corporations. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and send a FOIA request to every single judge out there and send it to every court clerk. And then you'll find how quickly they will run, because they don't like it when you pull the curtain back on the wizard. We are currently in like the Wizard of Oz, and we're about to pull the curtain back because these people never had jurisdiction over us. Another thing that's starting to come out and starting to release and drip through mainstream media is that Trump has been able to avoid many, many lawsuits, because what he generally does is he'll give them a conditional agreement. He'll say, sure, I'll contract with you if you can prove that you have jurisdiction over me. And they cannot prove jurisdiction. So that's why he's been able to completely avoid multiple lawsuits. And I can send you a clip, or I can link below a clip where a woman named Jan, and I don't remember her last name, has just come out with this information on mainstream media. So this is hitting the scenes. Like, we're finally able to say, no, really, guys, we can back this up with mainstream media data and really get you guys to look at this from a new lens. Okay. So how do we take back the country? How do we get it back? Well, let me just tell you, Bonds for the Win was such a huge success. But the reason it was a success, now that we looked at this and we looked at it closer and closer and closer, is because they didn't want us to know that they were corporations. They ran for the hills because they did not want us to know who we were dealing with and how they were deriving their authority over us. And so when we really started to audit, it was the oaths of office that they were so worried about us finding. So if you want to be a true digital warrior and you really want to try to understand, well, how our country got invaded, I highly suggest you consider FOIA requesting, sending a letter requesting an oath of office to every single elected and appointed official that you come across that you think is acting outside of the law. So I think if we did a nationwide audit, you're going to find out that you can take those oaths of office, you can take a black magic marker, you can highlight everything in all caps, and you can deem that fraud because it's a corporation trying to claim that they have authority over you. And you can post that to YouTube, and you can make YouTube videos and TikTok videos and go as viral as humanly possible, because we need the whole world to see how we were usurped. Okay. We need to now see why and how they took over our country and why we are such sitting ducks, if you will, for a bad flu to come around because they can just pretty much rule over us and we have no remedy. There is no law and order whatsoever right now because you're dealing with pirates. It's like you got on their ship, they handed you a sword and said, go for it. In the meantime, down below, we're going to bet on you. And we're going to see how well you fend yourself. Oh, and by the way, we're going to make you walk the plank at the end. That's what's happened. They docked their ship. They forced us into maritime law. They forced us into contracting with them. They bullied us. They came through with CPS. They stole our children. They conned us into signing contracts with them. We basically handed over our children at birth by signing the birth certificate over to the state. They claimed them dead on arrival. They put them in probate because we never claimed them. We never registered them properly. And so then they moved our birth certificate. They created bonds in our name under our birth certificate and in our social security card. And then they basically traded us on the open market as commodities, which means we've been trafficked ever since we were born. Ever since we were born, we've been trafficked. And you cannot hold the body as surety for a debt that the body does not owe. They were holding us as surety or collateral to the national corporation and to the state corporations. So while they're trading us on their markets and they're driving money and value out of us, we didn't even know it. We didn't even realize that they were drawing money, that there was another side of our ledger. And I'll get into that later because, again, all wars are bank wars. And we're still trying to disseminate all that information. I don't want to give you any misinformation right now, but it's important to know that when you signed your marriage certificate, you signed your property of your marriage over to the state, including the property of your children. And when you signed that birth certificate, you signed your children over to the Pope, and we didn't know better. Okay, we just did not know better. And when we signed a mortgage contract, we actually handed our property and our land over to the state. How do you win all wars? You capture the land. These foreign invaders captured all of our land. And trust me when I tell you, I've gotten my land patent back because you're really only truly allowed to pass land from one sovereign to another sovereign. It is not lawful or legal for them to consent to lay claim over our land after conning us in contracts. And it took me quite a while. There was a lot of red tape to get my land patent back. So this is how CPS is walking in and stealing children. So the last thing that I just want to mention is that the way the deep state operates is they single us out. Right now, there are over 250 foreclosures happening every month in Maricopa County alone. That means that people are getting singled out and they're getting thrown out of their homes unlawfully by this mafia because the mafia is getting desperate. They don't know how to make their money anymore because I think some of their coffer accounts have been seized through this whole process that Trump is doing. And so it's very important that we start to build back our republics. It's very important that we audit to understand how this all went wrong so that everyone can see just how corporations operate versus how we would operate as a republic or under trust law. It's very important that we all learn trust law now and learn how to operate in the private, learn how to manage our own estates and put our children in our estates so that the state cannot come after them. So another corporation cannot come after us. And we also need to set up a front line so as almost like a class action suit to be able to help all the people that are currently dealing with CPS right now, because 95% of the child trafficking reports now are coming through CPS. So a lot of people, a lot of really good people have been put in very compromising situations. And we as sovereign beings need to take a very calm, assertive, sovereign approach to this war at this point. We need to step back and go, okay, I was fooled. All right, the jig is up. Now what? Now it's time to prove who they are, who you are, regain your standing, because right now you're acting belligerent because you're participating in a illusion, a counterfeit government, counterfeit courts, counterfeit police officers, counterfeit. It's all brown shirts. It's just like World War II. But they did it in such a way that they came in and they swapped out the foundation of our country under our noses. So all this time we thought we were fighting for a vote. You never had a vote. You never had a vote for their corporation. Sorry, guys. And you never had law and order. Remember when Trump kept saying we need law and order? Remember when Antifa wars were breaking out and he kept saying, sorry, I can't come in unless the governors invite me. And that's because he's done every single thing by the book. First of all, he was a corporate officer for a corporation, so he has no jurisdiction over the sovereign nations. Second of all, there was no one sitting in those seats because all of the sovereign republics had been vacated in 1871. So there was no one to speak for the republics. And thirdly, he doesn't have jurisdiction. Even if the states were up and running, those republics were up and running, he doesn't have jurisdiction because it has to be the sovereign nations that call him in, because they were sovereign and separate. And so it was structured beautifully by our forefathers, and they lost their lives to give us this foundation. So I think it's time now that we go back and we learn our true history, and we learn how to take true remedy, and we learn how to reestablish our Article 3 courts, and we learn how to bring back common law where everybody is accountable. Where if you accuse me of something, I'm going to bring my 10 people and we're going to go to court and I'm going to defend myself lawfully under a trial by peers. All right, you guys, I hope that all made sense. I love you so much, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.